Hello. Hey, I want to share a quick anecdote, a quick story, and then I guess a conclusion that I drew from it. So let me start by saying, over the pandemic, I wrote 2 pandemic books that were very inspired. One of them is The Seeker. So in it, it's got dual narrators. So it's sort of constructed where you see one chapter from one character's point of view, the protagonist, and then you switch to the love interest's point of view. And I've always been fascinated by those kinds of stories because obviously reality is malleable due to subjectivity. But more than that, they were dual aspects of Amadeus, the protagonist's psyche. Icarus was meant to be, because he was raised in confinement in the labyrinth, meant to be not pure innocence, but actually our pure essence, our core essence, our soul minus mind and ego. And then Amadeus had been disappointed with the world, so he was all, right, self-protection, meaning mind and ego. And the two were battling it out in his head, and so I just took that approach, almost like when a dream analyst will view every character in a dream as an aspect of the dreamer's psyche. And some literary criticism treats every character in a book as an aspect of the author's psyche. It's a snapshot of their worldview at any given moment. So that all is kind of how I roll. But I very much strengthened, once I figured out what Icarus and Amadeus represented, I very much strengthened it. And it's kind of a big part of the piece, not in terms of the character arc or the emotional arc, but the conceptual part of it. Okay, so all that said, here's the story. I have an upstairs neighbor in my apartment. I've been here 12 years, and he actually is the gentleman who came up with the mathematical axioms that allows for all interstellar space travel. It's called gravity assist. So as an intern at JPL, he actually came up, there were a lot of people on the project, but he's the one that mastered the specific, mathematics that allowed it to succeed. Of course, like Edison and Tesla, he was sort of written out because he was just an intern, and it was, like Edison, it was given to somebody with more creed at JPL. And then there was a lawsuit years later anyway, but he died in complete obscurity in a little tiny apartment upstairs. So basically, he was a hoarder, and he laid there for 3 days before basically I had to make the welfare check. I had to call and make sure that they came out and did a welfare check. My manager, property manager, claimed he did that. He said, I left them a message. Well, I found out later, of course, it doesn't work that way. There's no outgoing message system. So after 3 days, I was the one that did the welfare check. I then proceeded to hold the hand of his 93-year-old sister, whom I had become friendly with, and literally sort of mediate between her and the cops, the mortuary, the coroner, Glendale Adventist Hospital, and I think that's it. The cops, the mortuary, the coroner, Glendale Adventist Hospital, and then of course my property manager. So my property manager, who will go unnamed, all he did, he brought a bird cage at one point to catch the loose bird in the apartment. That was his contribution. I then proceeded, because her brother was a hoarder, I proceeded to make sure that, I won't say her name, but the 93-year-old sister didn't break a hip upstairs because she was going through everything. So it was an ongoing project for me, and I feel very lucky that I was able to do it. I wasn't working, I was able. The bottom line is it was the right thing to do, morally and ethically. So, a year later, I'm sort of going back and forth with my management company about a huge bill that I've got that resulted from them not properly replacing my wall heater. So in all of it, I'm gently pointing out, because it did not even register, my contributions didn't register with them at all, because they're all business all the time. So I'm sitting here going, I should have probably gotten a couple months free rent because I did my property manager's job for him. But of course, I've never mentioned it, and now it's coming up for me. So in mulling it over in my head, I had the thought, how you have those imaginary conversations in your head. I would say this, or I should have said that, or I'm going to say this. And, in that imaginary conversation, I found myself saying, well, actually, I did it not trying to score free rent, but because it's the right thing to do. Once upon a time, we all looked out for our neighbors because it takes a village. It's called compassion, right? It's called altruism, compassion, and on an evolutionary theory level, we are wired for altruism. So it was just the right thing to do, and I was raised that way. It didn't question it. But I do know it didn't register with them because this management company is not particularly ethical. They have many pending lawsuits against them for sort of breaching rental law, California rental law, and even just, that greed. It's like what the market will bear is what capitalism is all based on, but it actually is at the expense of some people because there's no compassion in that equation. So in my head, I was sitting there thinking, well, I did the right thing. Well, what does that mean? I was raised that way, yes. I did the right thing morally. I did the right thing ethically. And I thought, I've always been big on principle. And again, what I was working out with Amadeus and Icarus in that novel was my own journey toward compassion. There is a phrase in it where the two factions warring it out in his head very much state their case. And Icarus says to Amadeus, principle is a glacier slow to melt. Probably my favorite line in the novel. And I was thinking very much of The Crucible. If anyone has ever seen that, Joan Allen has an amazing monologue where she stuck to principle. She punished her husband for his dalliances for decades of their marriage, and she ends up regretting it because, principle is a glacier slow to melt. So that was my wording. I think her words were, I kept a cold house. So anyway, my ordeal, my brush with death, navigating a really broken healthcare system during a pandemic to get the care I need, being surrounded by members of the gay community I'd conveniently been able to dismiss, and now I'm one of them. I mean, nothing could put you in touch with your compassion more than that. More than being part of a club you've been able to dismiss because of privilege. So anyway, the conclusion I came to is that, yes, I've always identified myself as a man with principles and logic, of course, and reason. And I often put principle before compassion. I did have a pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality for many years. And I got in trouble in friendships because I, on paper, stuck to principle, but really I was being asked to just open my heart and be more compassionate. So the little offering here is that ethics and morals are not based on principle. True ethics are based on heart, on compassion for your fellow man. So, right, ethics and morals are based in love, not principle. Just mull it over, think about it. I may not be right about that. I think there's ethics, there's business ethics, there's all kinds of moral ambiguity, there's moral relativism, there's the ethics of war, contradictions in terms like that. So there's a lot of connotations and there's a lot of context in which one could ponder the true meaning of ethics and morals. But I think in life, like the story I just told, actually principle is cold and does not, and that's what some would say of sort of communism in general, that in principle, on paper, it looks really good, but it lacks heart. Okay, that's it. Hope that made sense. Bye.